If we want to change the world, then we've got to change the way it works, is the title of the next presentation we're about to hear from Bianca Hunt, co-CEO with AIM Mentoring. Bianca is a proud Kamilaroi, Barkindji, Ballardong and Whadjuk woman who was born and raised in Brisbane. At just 22 years of age, she has worked across the government, corporate and not-for-profit sectors. She's graduated from the Queensland University of Technology last year with a double degree, Bachelor of Business and Bachelor of Creative Industry. She began her journey with AIM back in 2010, originally as a mentee in the program, and has since worked with AIM since 2016 and has now moved into her role as the 2018 co-CEO of AIM and oversees the University of Sydney AIM program. She is constantly driven to challenge every person to imagine what is possible and to be limitless. She is also a gun AFL footballer in her spare time. She has filled in for us at late notice, for which we are most grateful and most fortunate. Please welcome Bianca.
Ticking clock to cure away. Every second means a mile. Every minute means a day. I hope you're walking in the sun. Hope you're going to be someone. Dreamt that one day I would find you on my way. Maybe one day, maybe today.
I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land in which we've gathered today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I pay my respect to the past elders because they are the warriors who fought for us to be here today. And I pay my respect to the present elders because they are the ones who are continuing our culture and the survival of our way of life into the future. And I pay my respects to the emerging elders because they are the ones who will continue our culture into the future. I'd also like to acknowledge the fact that I am a Kamilaroi and Barkindji woman on my father's side and a Ballardong and Whadjuk woman on my mother's side, and that's from two different sides of the country, but I was lucky enough to be born and raised in Brisbane. So it's a pleasure for me to be able to live, eat, grow, and sleep on Gadigal country. In terms of this week, I mean, we've just had a week of reconciliation, and it was about encouraging our knowledge of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders across the country. So for my speech, I'm going to go with that theme of don't keep history a mystery, learn, share and grow. So that's how I'm going to speak today. If I can get you all to close your eyes. I want you to imagine yourself as a grade 12 student. Some of you don't have to imagine. And you're 1 month away from graduating high school. You've just gotten called into your guidance counsellor's office. You open the door, you sit down, and the guidance counsellor turns to you and says, "So, what do you want to do after high school?" You turn around as the eager grade 12 student and you say, "I want to go to university." And the guidance counsellor turns to you and says, "Well, university's hard to get into. What else do you have in mind?" Open your eyes. That was me 4.5 years ago. I had an educational system that didn't encourage me to go on to further education and to pursue the dreams that I wanted to be in. I had teachers and peers telling me that I wasn't the right person to go down a certain path. I had my peers questioning my Aboriginality and my identity and who I was as a person. But more importantly, I think a lot of the kids that I went to school with were told these things. But the difference between me and those kids is that both my parents became first in their family to go to university. They embedded the importance of education in my family, and they were able to stop those cogs that were running. Both of my parents only went to a grade 10 level of education, and that was what was encouraged at that time. You were either going to grade 10 and you'd go out to work, or you'd go out into the sports and you'd become a professional football player or something like that. That was what we were destined to be when my parents were at school. Prior to that, with my grandparents, they only went to around a grade 6 level of education, and then they were forced to go into employment. For me, going through school, it was really important, and we were always encouraged to get to grade 12. That was the level of standard. You can get to grade 12 and figure out what you wanted to do from there. But with me and going to school, as much as you could go to grade 12, the level of expectations was only set at a certain standard. I was constantly told that university was not the place for me and that I wasn't the sort of person that would go there, which is quite funny because both my parents, against all odds, decided to go and do education and go into a higher level of education so that they could actually pivot the way that our family was going to be directed in. That's something that we've had to deal with as a family growing up, and against all odds, I was able to do that. But not a lot of our kids have the same encouragement, and I think that's really important to address. So 8 years ago in 2010, I walked into the AIM doors up in Brisbane at the Queensland University of Technology, where I was lucky enough to be a mentee, and at the same time, my mother was a mentor and my sister became a mentor that year. I walked into a room where every single person that was working for the company was encouraging every single kid that walked through those doors to imagine what was possible. I think as a society, we keep telling our kids to stop imagining what's possible and we start telling them that it's impossible. I think that's something that we've got to stop doing. We've got to be able to enable and embed that level of confidence with our kids to ensure that they can feel like they can do whatever they want and be supported in those pathways. So when I walked in as a 14-year-old high school student, I was like, this is the place that I want to work. This is where I want to be. I want to work with these kids and I want to prove that you could do whatever you wanted to do and that we would be the ones that would support you to be there. Because you might have your family. I would go home constantly and be like, Mum, Dad, these people are telling me that I can't go to university. They're saying that these dreams that I have, it's just not possible. And I'm like, I was able to talk to them about that and they were able to reinforce the fact that I could go into that path and whatever I wanted to be. But a lot of the kids might not have been able to do that when they got back home. And then you could switch, you could be at your school. You'd be walking through and maybe some of your peers are saying, no, that's not the sort of path you want to go into. That's not what you're destined to be in. So we constantly had this sort of evolution of where the kids could go in, they'd be talking to these people, and you have a massive influence, especially educators. You have a massive influence of being able to tell kids where their path is and where they're meant to be going. If we start doing that, if we stop telling the kids that it's impossible to do these things, then we're going to be able to push somewhere in life, I reckon. So going from there, I kept knocking on AIM's door. I really wanted to work at this company, and it wasn't until my second year of university that I was able to work in the Brisbane program. So back with the kids some of them were probably grade 8 when I graduated, so I was able to work with them and to continue that sort of level of, I was walking the talk. I wasn't just going to be like, I want to work for these guys and tell these kids that they can do whatever, they can go and get an education. I actually wanted to do it myself. So I followed in my parents' footsteps. They were able to pivot our story so that they became the first in their families to be educated in a higher education. I became the first in my siblings to do it. My brother will be following this year and then my sister next year. But they were able to change that sort of direction that we were going in, and that was able to put us on that path. So in my second year, I was able to work for the company and be able to embed this sort of stuff. So what we do, I think if there's a slide up here, what we do at AIM is we build a bridge between university and high school for the powerless, the powerful, the powerless, for the haves and the have-nots. We're able to get our kids into the university campus at least 5 times throughout the year to show them where they can be. Because you know what? Sometimes they might have never even thought about going to university. And then as you start talking to them throughout their time, if they come into our program in grade 7, they would have already had about 5 to 6 years experience being on a university campus by the time they're grade 12. When you ask them, so what do you want to do after high school? Some of them just shrug, I might just come here. That's something that is a massive step. It's a massive, massive movement purely because so many kids don't think that they can get into these environments. And it's not that easy to get into it. Don't get me wrong, university is hard. It was probably the hardest 4 years of my life. But at the same time, it was able to help me work towards the person that I wanted to be and the person that I am right now. So at the end of this year, I was able to come on board. End of last year, just before I was walking across the stage in university, I was able to know that I was the 2018 co-CEO of AIM and that I was able to walk with the kids through this journey and get them into their university or to other pathways, whether it be TAFE, whether it be employment, but it's purely so that we could enable them to think of what they wanted to be and to ensure that continuous learning life that we have. From there, I mean, the program started off at the University of Sydney right here on these footsteps 14 years ago with 25 mentees and 25 mentors. Now we've been able to work with 15,000 kids across Australia. And then this year alone, we'll be working with 10,000 kids this year. And we've been able to launch globally. We've had a model that has been able to adapt into other countries. And every single time we've adapted it in Australia, we've moved to another country. So it wasn't that much more of a difference when we were opening it up in Uganda and South Africa. But I think the biggest message that I want to push out to you guys is that the past and our chapters that have been written before us have already been written. We've walked through them. But we do have a massive opportunity to be able to write the next chapters that we follow through. Whatever you choose to do with that is up to you, but I think no matter what, it's going to be working towards a better world. And to reinforce my topic, in order to change the world, we have to change the way it works. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.